Somewhere in America right now, a man is standing on a quarter-acre of dirt he doesn't live on, next to a home he doesn't own, collecting a check from a family who thinks they own their piece of the American dream. They do own it. They own the home. He owns the ground it's sitting on. And that distinction, home versus land, is the entire business. Here's what nobody tells you before you buy your first mobile home park. In most parks, you're not really landlording. You're not fixing toilets or replacing water heaters. Your tenant owns that headache. What you own is something closer to a monopoly, a strip of land your tenant's home is bolted to, in a country that has almost stopped permitting new parks from being built. By the end of this video, you'll know what it actually costs to buy in at 3 different price points, where the income really comes from, and why the accounting trick most new owners get wrong can quietly wreck a deal that looked perfect on paper. The hidden mechanism built into every park that makes tenants some of the most trapped customers in American housing. And the one risk that doesn't show up in any cap rate, a risk that's already ended in lawsuits, state investigations, and now threatens to unwind the entire investment thesis that made this asset class famous. Here's the last one, and it's the important one. 20 million Americans live in a manufactured home. Almost nobody builds new parks anymore. And the man collecting rent on that quarter acre may be sitting on one of the last real monopolies left in American real estate, or on a business one bad law away from falling apart. Start with what you're actually buying, because it's stranger than it sounds. Most owners don't own the homes. Roughly 2/3 of park residents own their own mobile home and simply rent the pad underneath it. You collect lot rent, not house rent. Your tenant handles their own roof, their own plumbing, their own repairs. At the small end, a workforce park in a secondary market, 30 to 40 pads, older infrastructure. A town most people couldn't find on a map, trades for somewhere around $15,000 to $25,000 per occupied lot. Call it a 35-lot park at $20,000 a pad, roughly $700,000 total. With seller financing or a small local bank loan, your entry check lands somewhere between $140,000 and $210,000. What you're actually buying at this tier is old bones, a well and septic system instead of city utilities, gravel roads instead of pavement, and lot rents that have been asleep for a decade. Step up to a stabilized mid-sized park, 80 to 150 pads, city water and sewer, 90% plus occupancy, and you're in $3 million to $8 million territory. This is where agency debt starts to make sense. Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac both run small balance manufactured housing loan programs, non-recourse, up to 75 or 80% of value, the same basic structure that finances small apartment buildings. But the lender wants seasoning, real occupancy history, and real collections before they'll quote a rate. At the top, you're not buying a park. You're buying an asset class. Institutional buyers now compete for anything with 200-plus pads, paved roads, and population growth nearby, and they push cap rates on the best of these communities down to 4.5 to 5.5% tighter, in some cases, than apartment buildings. That compression is the whole story of the last decade in this business, and we'll come back to exactly why in a minute. First, infrastructure most buyers never think to ask about because it's buried under the ground. A failed septic system runs $30,000 to $50,000 to replace. A park-wide water line failure can run $200,000 or more. Nobody photographs a sewer line for the listing. Second, and this is the mistake that has quietly killed more first-time deals than any bad tenant park-owned homes. Some parks include homes the owner still holds title to and rents out directly, not just the land. New buyers routinely make the same error. They take the total rent roll, including the rent from those company-owned homes, and run it through the cap rate formula like it's all one number. You cannot do that. A mobile home is a depreciating asset, not real estate. Experienced operators cap only the lot rent income and value the homes themselves separately, usually just $5,000 to $15,000 each, based on age and condition, the way you'd price a used car. Confuse the two, and you can overpay for a park by hundreds of thousands of dollars without ever realizing it, because you accidentally paid real estate multiples for aging trailers. Third, the same tax reassessment trap that hits every commercial property. Close at a higher price than the previous owner paid, and in many states the county quietly rewrites your expense line before you've collected your first month's rent. Picture a single lot renting for $450 a month. Your share of the debt payment on that lot might be $310. The gap of $140 looks almost too small to matter. That's one lot, 1 month. Multiply it by 80 lots, 12 months, held for 20 years while lot rent climbs a few percent a year, and the loan quietly amortizes down. That $140 gap is the entire engine behind every mobile home park fortune ever built. Small, repeated, compounding the same trick behind almost every real estate fortune in America, just with a lower maintenance product underneath it. And the valuation math is where this business gets genuinely strange. At a 6% cap rate, every extra dollar of annual net operating income adds roughly $16.67 to what the park is worth. Raise average lot rent by just $20 a month across an 80-lot park, and you've added $19,200 a year in NOI, which at a 6% cap rate just added roughly $320,000 to the park's sale price, without laying a single brick. That single number is why lot rent increases in this industry are rarely about covering costs. They're about engineering value on paper. Every mobile home park you've ever driven past was designed around one uncomfortable fact, and once you see it, you can't unsee it. A mobile home isn't actually mobile. Moving one costs thousands of dollars in permits, a specialized hauler, a new foundation, and utility hookups on the other end. For most residents, once the home is set on the lot, it is never moving again. They own an asset that's economically welded to your land. That's not an accident of the industry. It's the foundation the entire business model sits on. Because your tenant can't easily leave, your lot has something close to a captive customer, and lot rents in these communities have risen roughly 45% over the past decade, often outpacing what happens to the rent on a comparable apartment. The land was never renting to a mobile home. It was renting to a resident who had already lost the ability to negotiate. None of this is charity, and none of it is cruelty. It's architecture, built around one fact: the customer is stuck. And that fact is exactly why this business is now facing the one risk that doesn't show up in any underwriting spreadsheet. Here's the trade nobody says out loud in the acquisition seminar: guaranteed feeling income from a tenant who structurally cannot leave, in exchange for a political and legal backlash that's building in real time. Between 2017 and 2021, institutional buyers went from roughly 13% to 23% of all mobile home park purchases nationally, chasing exactly the captive tenant dynamic we just described. One study of park sales in Florida found eviction filings jumped roughly 40% in the months right after a park changed hands. A class action lawsuit filed in 2023 alleged that lot rents at parks owned by one large operator were inflated at a rate of roughly 9.1% a year between 2019 and 2021 against a resident base with a median household income of about $35,000. State attorneys general have opened investigations. Lawmakers in multiple states have introduced bills to cap how much and how often lot rent can rise. This is the mechanism most new owners never underwrite. The entire cap rate compression story of the last decade, parks trading at 4.5 to 5.5% instead of the 8 to 10% they traded at 15 years ago, is built on the assumption that lot rent can keep climbing, year after year, on tenants who can't push back. Any state that passes a real rent cap on manufactured housing doesn't just cost you next year's rent increase. It can quietly break the valuation math the entire deal was priced on. The building's income was never really the risk in this business. The politics around a trapped tenant base always was. So who wins in this business? It's a less exciting answer than the seminar's promise. Frank Rolfe bought his first mobile home park, a rundown community in Dallas called Glen Haven, in 1996 for $400,000, with almost no idea what he was doing. He partnered with Dave Reynolds a decade later, and the two of them built one of the largest privately held manufactured housing portfolios in the country, at one point ranked the fifth largest owner of mobile home parks in America, a portfolio worth well over $500 million. Their playbook was never glamorous. By underperforming parks in unglamorous small towns, fix the infrastructure, raise occupancy, hold. At the very top of this industry sits the same name that shows up at the top of almost every leveraged real estate story in America: Sam Zell. His company, Equity Lifestyle Properties, is by far the largest owner of manufactured home communities in the United States, controlling roughly 160,000 lots nationwide. In the mobile home park world specifically, Zell isn't just an example of what's possible. Investors in this niche will tell you his presence in the industry is part of why banks lend into it so comfortably at all. If Zell's in it, it must be a real business. Most owners will never get near that scale, and that's not a failure. It's the honest median outcome of a business built on patient management of a captive income stream, not on luck. Take the modest path. You buy that 35-lot park for $700,000, put $175,000 down, finance the rest on a 20-year loan. After debt service, taxes, insurance, and a maintenance reserve for the well and septic system, you're likely clearing somewhere around $10,000 to $14,000 a year in real cash flow. Call it 6 to 8% on your down payment before principal paydown and appreciation. Boring, survivable. Not a story you tell at a party, but still standing in year 20, because the debt was fixed and the numbers were never stretched to reach the deal in the first place. The ambitious path looks like Rolfe and Reynolds. Buy one park, stabilize it, refinance conservatively as equity builds, use each refinance to fund the down payment on the next park, and repeat for a decade or two instead of betting everything on one leveraged swing. At real scale, the park stops being the product. The land underneath it becomes permanently scarce, because almost nowhere in America still permits new parks, and the debt against it slowly converts, tenant payment by tenant payment, into your own net worth. So no, the bank never checked your tenant's credit score before financing this deal, and it barely checked yours either. It was never really lending against a family's ability to pay. It was lending against a piece of land those families can't afford to leave. That's the business. Guaranteed feeling rent from a resident who's structurally trapped, in exchange for a legal and political risk that's only just starting to catch up with the industry. The land was never renting to the home. It was renting to whoever had nowhere else to go. If that reframe changed how you'd look at buying one of these, it's worth subscribing, because the next park we open the books on tests exactly how far that captive tenant math can travel before it breaks.